Hello. Okay, now I'm going to begin our reading hybrid lecture. And this hybrid lecture is about main ideas, and this is chapter 2. I'm starting my lecture, of course, at the beginning on page 57. Now let me say this before I start my lecture. If you haven't already read and annotated the chapter with your notes and things, stop right now, go back, do the chapter, and then come back and watch this video. Because this video is going to be talking to you about things that you should have marked and hopefully clarifying some things to help you identify the most important parts. So what we see, this chapter, of course, is about main ideas. So what you've possibly seen right here is that main ideas talk about what is the point of a particular piece of writing. And then, of course, bold-faced words you should always mark in your text. If you didn't underline this sentence, I'd like you to do that now as you listen to this lecture. Main ideas is the most important key to good comprehension. And you'll remember comprehension means understanding. Okay, at the bottom, it tells you that to find the main idea of a reading selection, ask yourself, what is the point that the author is trying to make? This seems easy, and I hope that it is easy for you, but sometimes it requires a good bit of thinking, as you'll see with the exercises in this chapter. Okay, if you did not do so already, I hope that you were able to identify the main idea of this reading passage. Let's take a look. We're looking now, what is this page? 58 at the top. There's a short article about school bullies. In this chapter, we're going to talk about two kinds of words, keywords actually. So we have list words, and an example of list words would be several reasons. And then we would assume that if it says several reasons, it's followed by reasons. Or several facts is going to be followed by facts. Sometimes it'll say several steps, and we know we're going to look for steps. So my point is, not only does the list words tell you what kind of support will follow, and what the main idea is, but it also tells you what kind of support you'll expect. If it says there's going to be facts, you look for facts. I hope that's clear. All right, and so here you'll see that the other thing I marked, not only the list words, but the transition words. And they give some of those on the pages that come up here. Let me just show you those very quickly. Yeah, they're showing you, first of all, the keywords. Let's see if I can show you that here. Oh, this way. There you go. Okay, so keywords I just mentioned. There's a list of them here, and that is on page 71. So make sure that you've identified these list words, and those can help lead you to the main idea of a passage. And then on the very next page, I'll move that over there, you see what they call, these are addition words. And you'll hear them referred to as transition words, and especially in your writing classes perhaps. You'll have your main idea and your transition words listed. So hopefully you're familiar with those somewhat. Okay. Let's go back now to wherever I was. All right. All right, essentially when we're looking for the main idea, we'll move this over again. The main idea acts like an umbrella, like this. And all the supporting details are underneath the umbrella. Now, we don't want to make our main idea too broad that covers other things that aren't there. So we have to keep it the right size. Okay? And then we don't want it too narrow. We don't want it to only cover one of the ideas. So you see it's kind of a balancing act when we're trying to find main ideas. Not too much, not too little, but think, what words could I use that would perfectly capture just this supporting evidence within this chapter? Okay? So, again, I'm calling your attention here. Very important, at the bottom of this page, what page are we looking at? 59. This is page 59. Doesn't show up there. It says, as you read through a passage, you must think as you read. So stay engaged. Sometimes, especially when we're tired, right, our eyes are just moving across the page. We don't want that. Make sure you're rested and alert whenever you're reading for an academic class or work, a professional pursuit. Make sure you have a lot of energy and you're thinking as you go along. So here, we're going to give 3 ways to help you find the main idea. So we're going to look for a general idea versus a specific one. The general one is the umbrella, of course. We're going to let the topic lead us to the main idea, and we know topics are repeated words. So if, for example, a piece of writing keeps mentioning Hawaii, 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 we know, they must be talking something about Hawaii, and then we have to figure out what that thing is. And the next thing is use keywords, two kinds of keywords. List words and addition words, or transition words, are the two types of keywords that we're going to be using. The list words, several kinds of, usually appear in the main idea, and then the transition words, or in this case the addition transition words, will indicate major supporting details that are underneath the umbrella. Okay? So here we see several reasons, and then we have one reason, the combination of size and personality. The second reason, overexposure to violent TV shows. And finally, exposure to real violence. So there we see some examples of keywords in that picture. We have some practices here. All right. Again, we look at this example. It says, the topic is the general subject of a selection. We know that those are repeated words. They give you an example of the bullies and so forth. Okay, this is something that I mentioned earlier. Here we're looking at page 68. In the middle of page 68 is a hint, and that's reminding you that you don't want it to be too big, what we call too broad, covering too much information, or too narrow, covering only one part. So I guess, for example, let me clarify by saying, if my topic was Hawaii, and I wrote a paragraph about Hawaii, then you read it and you said, oh, this is an article about island nations, or island places, islands. Well, there are a lot of islands besides Hawaii, so that would be an example of too broad, right? Here we're only talking about Hawaii. And then, if we were talking about just one beach in Hawaii, if we said this was about the beach in Hawaii, well, of course, that would be too narrow, because Hawaii is more than just beaches. So again, not an island nation, and not just one Hawaiian beach, but Hawaii would be the right umbrella to cover that particular example that I used. Okay, so not too broad, not too narrow. This will be helpful when we get our tests in reading. All right, next thing, this is page 71 here at the top. I'll move that a little lower. On page 71, they talk about using keywords. Here is an example of our list words, and I quickly flipped to that, so I showed you that earlier, but I want you to be aware. When you make your annotations here, this is what I'm looking for. You're going to underline the definition of keywords, and then you can draw the arrow down here to remind you that that's what keywords look like when we're talking about several items, 3 steps, 2 ways. All of these are an example of list words. Also, as I pointed out earlier in this video lecture, then we have the addition words or the transition words. And usually these come at the beginning of a sentence, not always, but usually they come at the beginning of a sentence that offers support for an idea. First, second, third, one thing, another thing, finally, that sort. Okay. Next, now that you've completed looking at this chapter and writing your marginal notes, we're going to talk about main ideas at the beginning, and that's usually either the first or the second sentence. First sentence is easy. That's where most of your main ideas come. It's certainly in a paragraph is the first sentence. So if you're ever struggling, always look at the first sentence to begin and then ask yourself, could that be the main idea? If it's not a main idea, sometimes that's just an introductory detail. It could be a question. We know questions generally are not the main idea because they're asking instead of telling. The main idea, of course, has to tell us something. So it's not going to ask. So often you'll have maybe a question and then the main idea, or even more common, you'll have, as it says here, some kind of contrast word. So it'll say, many people think that gossip is bad, if you remember that gossip example we used from an earlier chapter. However, gossip serves some purposes. Then we can see then that these transitions, but, yet, however, something showing contrast, nevertheless, that might be another word that shows contrast, and that would indicate that possibly Okay, I don't want to promise you, but if you have a transition word at the beginning of the second sentence, look at that one carefully, because that's a clue that it might be the main idea. So all of these are just hints. So I remember in class someone asked me, oh, will this always be the main idea? Well, no, it won't. You have to think as you read, going back to the original part of the chapter that I talked about. So this is the typical situation in most paragraphs, the first or the second sentence, but not always. Let's look at some other options. Okay. The next one is when we have the main idea in the middle, and you'll see I've made some marginal notes for you. Here they have a longer introduction. It could be 2 or 3 sentences. Then, oh look, a transition signal. Something to look at, right? Not a promise. That's not definitely the main idea. It is in this case. But look for these kinds of words. Maybe this is going to be the main idea. So we look at this, we know, because I'm showing you, this is the main idea. And it says, however, nuisance means annoying. Nuisance callers can be stopped if we take charge of the conversation. So it's telling us, then, a solution. Here's how we take charge of the conversation. So we have introduction, main idea, and then supporting points here. Main idea at the end continues on the next page. Let's talk a little bit about that. Okay, move that down. All right, here we see at the top of page 76, if you can't see that very clearly, at the top of 76 we have 3 supporting details at the beginning, followed at the end by the main idea. So here, you'll have to be careful about this one because we say a study, another study, and then finally even emotionally disturbed children. So we have 3 examples of how animals can help people. That's therapy. That's the main idea at the end. So you'll see, obviously, in this situation, they've given you all the support at the beginning, and then they tell you the main idea as the last sentence. Another typical kind of pattern that you'll find in some pieces of writing. And then perhaps you've been taught this in your writing classes. Often when a teacher asks you to write a paragraph, they ask you to put a topic sentence here, support, and then repeat the main idea again to remind the reader of what you're talking about. This reinforces for the reader the main idea. So sometimes you'll see the main idea repeated at both the beginning and the end. Okay. The last thing I'd like to talk to you about, of course, the very last pages of this reading assignment, page 79. On page 79, they talk about the central point or central idea. This is just another way to say thesis statement. And as you move through your ESL 41 writing classes and 51 writing classes, you'll hear a lot about a thesis statement. Simply put, this is a topic or a topic sentence for a longer piece of writing, usually with multiple paragraphs. 5 is a typically long selection. If it's more than 1 paragraph, then we commonly refer to it as the thesis statement. They put it down as thesis, that's fine. So I've marked that for you. So here, a little picture that reminds you of the importance of what we're talking about in this chapter. It says, good writers and speakers make a point and support the point, and then good listeners and readers will recognize the point and recognize the support for the point. So to summarize, in this chapter we've gone over a few things helpful in identifying the main idea of a piece of writing. And so obviously the first step is always be thinking. Because sometimes there won't be list words. I believe we talked about this in the class. There's not always going to be several things or 2 ways. So be thinking. There won't always be transition signals that are clear. So look and think as you read what would be strong support for an idea. But these are ways that can give you hints or clues to what the main idea is. So you want to look for list words, like several items or 3 ways or 4 approaches to a problem. And then you want to look for transition words. So first, second, another thing, finally, 1 example. Okay, all of these things would show support for that particular idea. So I hope you'll remember that right before our test, it's always a good idea to go back at the last pages of our chapters in reading, to go back over the chapter review, and of course, any notations that you've made during the writing process. So I'm assuming now that you have completed your reading assignment. I would like you to be sure that you annotate any questions that you have on an assignment. And that means if you run across a particular practice in the book that you didn't understand the answer to, please mark that. You'll remember we had some questions in class and students were struggling to find where the question was. So please, as you do both the homework in vocabulary and reading, make sure you have your pen or a pencil handy and mark anything that you struggle with or had problems with. And that way when we come in for our Thursday class, you'll remember where the issue was and I'll be able to better help you. All right, that concludes our reading lecture for week 3. I wish you all a good week of working. And I will make sure and get these up posted for you right away. Thank you very much for listening. Good luck with your homework assignments. And of course, make sure that you stay on top of these. Do not get behind in this class because it's easy to slip away. And I'm taking careful track of attendance as we go forward. So I'll get better at this, and I want you to get better at this as we all work together on this hybrid class. It's kind of a new adventure for all of us. So we'll keep working hard and working together to do well. Okay? Thank you. That's all for the reading lecture.